Alan Gregerman, welcome to Partnering Leadership. I am thrilled to have you in this conversation with me.
Delighted to be here. Thanks for having me on.
It's exciting to have you on, Alan. I think the first conversation we had was 20 some years ago. You have been focusing and studying innovation for all these years. You've been talking about it, and you've written an outstanding book, The Wisdom of Ignorance: Why Not Knowing Can Be the Key to Innovation in an Uncertain World. But before we get to that, Alan, would love to know a little bit more about you. Whereabouts did you grow up, and how has your upbringing helped contribute to who you've become?
I grew up in Berkeley, California, and I remember at the age of around 7, I got a gift that profoundly changed my life that my parents gave me. It was my first atlas. It was a Hammond World Atlas. Not sure if Hammond still makes atlases. I used to sit on the floor of our living room, open a page to a map of a place I'd never been, and ask my parents if they'd ever been there. Other than World War II, my folks had never left America. But they always said, no, but I bet it's fascinating. Someday, hopefully, you'll get to go there. And so the reason I mention that is from an early age, I was always fascinated with the fact that we live in a big world filled with ideas and possibilities. And I hoped someday I could connect with people and learn from them. Fast or moderately fast forward, I am an okay high school student. I have a lot of potential, but I probably don't apply myself. My parents decide I should work before I go to college. I worked for a year and a half as a subway technician repairing BART subway cars. During that year and a half, I also worked nights. That was a good way to motivate you to want to go to college. So I worked nights. I make 10 suggestions for how to improve the way that cars are repaired. None of them are ever paid attention to during the time I'm there. 3 years later, I get a note, we've adopted some of your suggestions, but because you're no longer an employee, you're not eligible for the bonus. So I want to mention that because I often think about large organizations not being open to innovative ideas. I then go to college. I think I start to like college. I think I'll be a professor, but I hate being a graduate student because in colleges, I hope you don't have audience members who are professors. In colleges, they argue about stuff that really doesn't change the course of the world. And I didn't want to be there. I wanted to be somewhere else. So I finished my doctorate, but then I go to work, and then eventually I start my own company, and I've been an innovation consultant for 37 years.
Wow, what an outstanding origin story of your genuine curiosity, Alan, because it requires that curiosity for us to learn, whether it is about other cultures or with respect to innovation. And I was laughing as you were talking about the 10 ideas that you came up with. A lot of times, young people join teams and organizations and see a lot of opportunities for improvement. And the managers are, we've seen it, we've tried it, we've been there, can't do it. So if you were to go back to BART or a similar organization or team, how would you change things so a young, energetic Alan who comes up with 10 new ideas is more likely to come up with more ideas and maybe help improve the team and organization as well?
So that's a good question. And I'd like to think that there's even more of an imperative now because the world's changing super quickly. So I'd like to believe leaders understand that if they don't do new things, their company or organization is going to become irrelevant. But here's what I do. We often say when a new person arrives, great, welcome, here's your orientation, here's your inbox, do more of what we already do, and we'll see you at the holiday party. And the reality is, new employees are actually the most remarkable source of new ideas for us. And they're remarkable because they've actually been somewhere else. They've been somewhere where they do things differently. So if I wanted to change the equation, I'm glad you asked. I even have a prop here. I would give every new employee a clipboard, okay? And here's my clipboard. And the clipboard has a sheet of paper on it. And I would ask them to spend the first few days not having us orient them, but them orienting us. I'd ask them to go to meetings, talk to new colleagues, poke their heads in offices, hang out at the coffee pot. And then what I'd ask them to do is every time they see us doing something where they think we're brilliant, I'd ask them to write it down. And every time they see something and they say, we're clueless, I'd ask them to write it down on the other side of the paper. And then I'd have them meet with management and I'd have them say, here's what I've discovered in my few days. And if I were a leader or a manager, I'd say, this is awesome. And for the things they said that were brilliant, I'd pat myself on the back. And the things they said were clueless, I'd say, is there one of those where you really think you can help us to be better? If so, I'd like you to organize a team of people you've met and help us figure that out. What have I done? I've gotten people to be engaged right at the start. I've showed them that we believe their ideas are valuable. And I've told them, take something that matters and make a difference. Suddenly, I've changed the entire equation. So from day one, they actually believe this is a place they can do something. If that had happened to me umpteen years ago, umpteen is a big number, I might have stayed a little bit longer. I didn't like working nights, but I might have stayed a little bit longer. But there was no sense of that at all. In another era, I was working in a giant plant, 800,000 square feet. Periodically, the plant manager would drive a golf cart through the plant and say hi to everybody and say, proud of you. And then I would say, excuse me, sir, I actually submitted an idea. And I'm sure he would just drive the golf cart away. So we need to get people, especially today, to realize for two reasons that they matter right from day one. The first is for them, okay? We want to keep the best people. The second is for us. The reality is if we don't keep getting new ideas and changing, we're not going to be around. Let's be honest.
What a brilliant and practical idea that everyone listening to the podcast can implement in their organizations, Alan. First of all, Gallup continually does their employee engagement surveys, and it is pathetic at how low engagement has stayed. Now, one of the challenges I find is most of the managers and CEOs I talk to assume that it's a lot better in their team and organization. So, what you're mentioning engages the mind and the heart of the individual immediately. And also, as you said, people are much more likely to see things that we have gotten used to, both with respect to what is brilliant and what is not working as well, to be able to point it out to us. Now, what I wonder, Alan, is what I find is sometimes there is a rationalization that happens with respect to opportunities for improvement. How can we overcome that rationalization?
So we need a different set of leaders, or we need the existing leaders we have to develop different skills. And I think tied to what you're saying is one of the fundamental skills all leaders need to have is they need to be humble, okay? They need to have a sense of humility and they need to come clean with all their people that they don't know all the answers, okay? And so it's presumptuous to assume if I'm a leader, and I know a lot of leaders are listening to your podcast, that I can go to work every day and seem like I have it all together, like I know everything, like we're going in the right direction. We don't need to change. I'm the master of this ship. What leaders need to be willing to say is, we don't know all the answers, but we'll go on a journey together to figure it out. Because whoever figures out the right answers first is likely to be most valuable to their customers. So first we have to change that mindset that leaders are experts, leaders know it all, that the folks who are in the C-suite are the masters of our destiny, and we have to spend a lot of time working our way up to ever even talking to them, but rather that an idea can come from everywhere. And actually the people who've been outside our walls are way more likely to pay attention to the changes occurring than the people who are inside our business. But the reality is leaders need to change. I believe leaders can change, but that's fundamental to all the work I do in innovation is leaders have to say, we don't have the answers, but we can figure out something brilliant if we work on it together.
And that humility is really important, Alan. I love it. You describe humility as a competitive advantage, and it is genuine humility with a curious mindset.
This is what I tell all of our customers. You could be awesome today, but 5 years from now, you could be out of business because the world will be different 5 years from now. And it's going to require different products, different services, different solutions, different people who support what we do in different ways. We just have to be different. We're not going to bet the ranch. We're going to keep doing the core of what we do, but we're going to make that better. And then we're going to look and see what new things do we need to do. Then the other thing that you said, which is fundamental to why we need to be curious, is all these companies say to me, we're awesome right now. Our customers love us. Why would we change? And I say, with all due respect, your customers love you because they haven't found anything better yet. If they find something better, they will drop you like a hot whatever. You pick the cuisine you like, potato or any other cuisine. And so the reality is they're just out there waiting for three entrepreneurial folks to eat an artisan pizza, drink IPA, and over a weekend conceive of a way to overthrow your business. And so you've got to be the ones that are thinking, being curious, as you say, and being willing to disrupt at least a part of your own business, or you're not going to be in business 5 years from now.
And I am convinced, Alan, that in part because of AI, that is going to happen to more organizations at a faster rate than ever before. And one of the challenges I find is that I interact with in the DC area a lot of people in non-governmental organizations, nonprofits, associations, where their assumption is what you're talking about is for Silicon Valley or technology companies, as opposed to being relevant across industries.
Oh, I think it's relevant across all industries. Let's be honest. Now, you might be suggesting, because in DC there are a lot of government contractors, that maybe their timeline is shorter. But the reality is, think about the fact that most government contracts are for 5 years. Do they expect you, when you're coming up for a renewal of that contract, to propose the exact same thing? Or maybe be 5 years ahead, maybe be thinking differently. But I think everywhere else people understand this. Everywhere else people are starting to grapple with the fact that they could be disrupted, that it doesn't take a lot. And that, my book, The Wisdom of Ignorance, I happen to have a copy here, but is it tied to the simple notion that actually there are so many, the barriers to creating something brilliant are not particularly high. They're more our imagination than our expertise. And so if that's the case, there are plenty of people out there with a keen imagination who can figure out how to do something better. Think about it. So everyone listening has driven, this is a race car, but everyone listening has taken an Uber probably, okay? Was Uber developed by people who were in the taxi cab business who were happy to run taxi cabs? No. Uber was developed by two friends who were in Paris and couldn't find a taxi cab on a winter evening. They knew that technology had changed in something called GPS or GIS technology, global positioning systems, was good. And so they knew that you could take a person who had a car and combine them with a person who needed a ride and bring them together in an app. That didn't take somebody in the taxi cab business. The taxi cab folks were asleep at the wheel, so to speak. And these guys figured out how to eat their lunch. Today, this is the way that most people get a ride. Taxi cabs can wait for you at the airport, but you're more likely to call an Uber and wait in the Uber line. And so the world is filled with these ideas. Airbnb, a lot of the folks who are listening use an alternative to hotels. Wasn't started by people who were in the hotel business. It was started by two friends, eventually three, who were design students who suddenly needed to pay their rent and decided to rent out their couch to folks who were attending a conference, couch surfing, and then suddenly said, do you know how many couches and apartments and houseboats and castles and caves and all kinds of things exist in the world? Today, they're like 10 million that are up on their site. So again, when we don't know stuff and we take a fresh look, we have a chance to create a breakthrough. And so as leaders, we need to create a culture in which our people are looking to create breakthroughs and not get stuck just doing the exact same thing we do every day.
Those breakthroughs are important, and I want to differentiate and put them into two buckets, Alan, in that Some are disruptive breakthroughs that come from innovation, typically from outside of the industry, exactly as you said. When you have experience and understanding within the industry, you don't know what you don't know and what else can be done. So I find it's very hard for organizations to be innovative themselves within their industry to a disruptive level. That said, the kind of innovation that matters and they can do is those smaller experiments that you talk about also in your book, where they can incorporate innovation into the evolution of the organization. Not everything is disruptive, not everything is taxi cabs to Uber. There is that disruptive innovation, but there are a lot of things that are built on evolutionary innovation where the organization improves gradually and shifts rather than total disruption.
I agree with that. And I have the exact same hack that will help people to address both. But you're right. So let's think about the fact, and I think we talked about it a few moments ago, that we need to invest in the core of what we do, but we always need to be better. We need to apply technology. We need to think about how to support what we do. We need to be better at that. We need new ideas. And even some of those ideas are going to come from other industries. Want to be better at customer service? The likelihood is your industry is not the greatest at customer service. But if I took you to visit a Ritz-Carlton hotel, or I took you to Nordstrom's, you'd have a totally different idea about customer service. You can apply those to your industry. So we need to be great at what we do. That's the kind of minimum daily adult vitamin requirement because people are going to nibble at that. But I also believe we need to do experiments which start small but eventually are breakthrough. So here's the hack. If I'm a leader, one day a month, I need to ask all of my people to leave the office and wander around. I need them to take notes on everything they see that's remarkable or is a sign that the world is changing. New customers, new technologies, Waymo driverless cars in the street, whatever, people using an app to pay for something, whatever the case is. IKEA, even do it yourself, right? Who would have ever thought that IKEA would be so popular because you have to buy knockdown furniture and assemble it yourself? But people think it's cool because I saved money doing it. But you wander around and look for places where they're doing brilliant things, and then you bring those ideas back and you apply them to both your core business. Is there something we can do better? Might we have a do-it-yourself element of what we do? Might we think about technology that makes it that we don't have to have people? Might we think about a different customer experience? And then you also use those ideas as a starting point for what are we missing? What's going on in the world that should be a new thing we do that makes us better?
That, Alan, is one of the most transformative practices that people can start embracing and implementing in their teams and organizations. I had a conversation a couple of years ago with Steve Robinson, who was the chief marketing officer at Chick-fil-A and served on the board. And he mentioned that when they wanted to grow Chick-fil-A, exactly to your point, when they wanted to measure and think about customer service, they went to Nordstrom's. When they wanted to look at processes, they visited Amazon. For certain things, they went to BMW in Germany. So you think, why would a fast food restaurant be looking at all these other businesses? Because they wanted to look outside of the industry to innovate and to learn. So this is such a brilliant practice that I see, unfortunately, so few organizations implement.
So very few do. And so think about it. I could be sitting in my office. The world is passing me by, okay? But I keep my head down. I get my work done. So why don't I want my people to get up? I take teams of people exploring the world around them. We've done these explorations to look for brilliance tied to what they're trying to do in 22 cities around the world, including Washington, Chicago, New York, Boston, San Francisco, other cities around the world. And I curate experiences tied to what they're trying to do that help them to think differently, that open their eyes to new possibilities. I think companies need to do this regularly. And even if they don't take those ideas today, some of those ideas will resonate a month from now or 6 months from now, and they'll start to say, we're missing a big part of the market. It's interesting. I do work with Mercedes-Benz, and Mercedes-Benz has struggled to get young people, the next generation of luxury car buyers, to buy their cars. Why? Because they didn't think about them. They didn't look around. The folks at Audi and BMW have lots of young customers because they have models that appeal to young people and because they actually went out and said, what are young people buying? What will be exciting to them? So there's so many examples that abound of folks that just think differently because they're open to ideas in other industries. As you suggest, if our industry isn't the best at something, why do I want to follow that? The best practices in our industry aren't going to help me. I need to figure out who's brilliant. And it's not hard to do. I can get out and look around. I can even do a Google search initially. I can go on ChatGPT or any AI engine and say, who's awesome at customer service? I should at least be doing that. There's no excuse for not doing that.
It's a great practice, and it's something that I would encourage everyone to do. Now, one of the challenges is the expertise that we have, Alan, within our industry or sector. Typically, even if you look at employment ads, they want someone who has done exactly the same thing in that industry. It's very rare for them to want to bring outside perspectives in. So, how can we bring more outside perspectives into the teams and organizations we are leading and not rely on the expertise that we have relied on for so long?
So you've hit like the $60 question or whatever, that TV show from a long time ago. Okay. My view is the following. I always say the following to folks, and that is there's value in expertise, but there's genius in not knowing stuff. So let's peel that back. Every organization that I've ever worked with has plenty of experts. They actually don't need any more experts. They have folks that can tweak this or tweak that or make it better or defend what we've already done in the past. What we need to now start to bring in is people who can make us more expansive, broader, bigger thinkers. And so the error in those advertisements for senior level positions is that they're trying to simply maintain the way they've always behaved. So I'm okay. I get sent friends because I'm in the innovation field say, saw this advertisement for vice president of innovation. What do you think about this? And I look at it and say, they actually don't want a vice president of innovation. They want another senior manager who's going to tell them they're pretty darn innovative to begin with. Their ad should say, looking specifically for people in other industries who are remarkable at this, okay? Who are remarkable at connecting with consumers, who are remarkable at B2B, but not from our industry. Because we have plenty of people who understand our industry. Why do we want any more? Maybe we want to talk to them at the coffee pot because they speak our language, but we don't need them. We need more interesting people in our organizations.
Alan, what you're saying has been important. My audience is familiar because I do conversations on AI at least once or twice a month with the fact that the value of expertise and knowledge is going down to zero as a result of AI. Therefore, it's the kind of judgment, and AJ Agrawal talks about this in Prediction Machines and Power of Prediction beautifully. The value of judgment is what humans can bring. And that judgment, a lot of times, comes from open, fresh perspectives that are not from within the same sector, industry, silo that we have been in. So, what you're saying has been important. But I think as we shift into this AI age, it's going to become even more critical.
So I'm actually speaking tomorrow at a conference on AI, and I'm the speaker who's talking about why humans matter. You've hit a nerve or an area that really matters to me. So think about what you've just said, because it's super important to everybody listening. But here's what I'd like to think is as AI gets more sophisticated, it is going to be replacing some of the jobs that experts, people who know how to do things technically, are doing today. It's not going to replace the people who connect the dots, imagine, think about new ideas. And so that's what we need humans for, is we need humans to be the ones that imagine a world filled with better products and services, filled with more opportunity for everybody. These are challenges and opportunities we haven't solved yet, and machines aren't going to do that. But if you simply do something technical that can be repeated and repeated all the time, then the reality is that AI could be taking your job. If you position yourself as someone who brings fresh ideas and energy and possibilities, AI is not going to take your job. But if you think about, here's one of my favorite ideas. So this is a boot that was invented in 1912. Okay. This was a boot that was invented by a guy named Leon Wood Bean. You now know why he called himself LL. Okay. But what was cool about this boot was the fact that it came with an unconditional guarantee of satisfaction, a guarantee that was tied to every single product they sold for 107 years until people started taking advantage of it, and they stopped the guarantee in the year 2019. The idea for the guarantee was Leon Wood's. He said, I don't want anybody to buy a product from me that they're not totally satisfied with. A machine would not have come up with that idea, okay? A human said, I want to connect with my customers. I want to be valuable to them. I want them to define what's valuable. That's something that a human can do. I can query AI all I want. You've had people, I'm sure, that are way smarter than me about AI. I get some good stuff. Does it solve problems for me? No. And I can query and I can become a master of querying, but I haven't come up with a query that says, think about a new and compelling way to solve this challenge or create incredible value for customers. I need to talk to customers, connect dots, and figure out how to do something remarkable. AI is not about doing remarkable yet. AI is about actually doing the basics. So if you're just about doing the basics, good luck. If you're about doing something remarkable, I have a lot of faith in you.
Alan, one of the challenges I see is that whether it is in our education system, we have consistently trained people to do the basics and focus on the basics, or in our organizations and teams, we have job descriptions that funnel people into performing the basics. The things that you just mentioned right now, AI can do very well.
So, what should our education system do? It should teach people to think. It should be teaching people to be excited about ideas. It should be teaching them to connect the dots. And it should be teaching them, unlike what we learn in kindergarten, that there's more than one right answer to every problem. Think about this, the first math problem that we learned, what's 1 plus 1? And if you didn't say 2, your teacher would say, gosh, your parents need to do a better job at home. But think about it in the real world. If I put you and me together, 1 plus 1, and we can't, by what we know, come up with some new ideas and make 1 plus 1 more than 2, then we've wasted the time of your audience. So the reality is, what we need is people who understand 1 plus 1 can be anything if I'm willing to have a fresh perspective or connect with people with different perspectives. So I think we have to start with that. Starts in grade school. I like to say the kind of disrupting of our ability to be brilliant starts when the school bus takes us away, but it goes on through college. What do we do in college? We have to pick a major, right? And what does the major do? It tells us there's a way to look at the world. I'm an economist. I look at the world this way. I'm a civil engineer. I look at the world this way. I'm an archaeologist. I like to dig things up. But whatever the case is, and so it tells us there's a way to look at the world. There's so many ways to look at the world. And if we want to be relevant in the future, we need to be open to all of them.
Therefore, we need to encourage that kind of thinking in our teams and organizations because of this pace of change. Now, one of the things that you say in the book, you must have known that one of my most favorite quotes is by Andy Grove, and he titled his book, Only the Paranoid Survive. Unfortunately, Intel hasn't
Is
been following
struggling.
that for the past 10, 15 years. But while Andy Grove was there, they were really paranoid. You mentioned paranoia can be a positive force. So, how can we embrace paranoia as a positive force, Alan?
Maybe it's just something that dawns on me and a few of the people I hang out with, but in a world changing fast, we all need to be a bit paranoid. And here's what I mean by paranoia. It's not necessarily that we have nightmares. We had those as kids and we might still have them as adults. But the reality is, in a fast changing world, somebody is gaining on it. Somebody's following us and gaining on us. And we need to always be looking over our shoulder and seeing who's thinking about things in a new way, who could cause a threat to what I do, who could literally eat our lunch. And so this idea that somebody's following us is actually a good thing because it keeps me on my toes. It tells me that I've got to be different next week than I am this week. And so I actually love the idea of paranoia, but I have to be honest, when I was drafting this book and showing it to my wife said, "Do you want to put that people should be paranoid in a business book?" And I said, I want people to not be blindsided by a world that has them in their crosshairs, okay? Everyone listening to this, their company or organization is a target for somebody else. We either disrupt ourselves by doing new and valuable things, or we let somebody else do that over time. And so that's the power of paranoia is if I understand that, I'm going to act differently. I'm going to act faster. I'm going to test more things. I'm going to stay way more connected to my customers. It challenges me to be awesome all the time.
That's an outstanding point, Alan. And I think a healthy level of paranoia is necessary for all of us. One of the challenges I see is that we find reasons why the disruption or the changes will not impact us, our team, our organization, rather than a healthy level of paranoia with humility would consider that yes, it can. Therefore, how do we need to innovate and adjust accordingly? And I find some of the celebrations, some of the recognition, some of the feedback that leaders get from within their teams and from the outside world keeps confirming that they are right, that they know it all, rather than celebrating those who are a little paranoid and humble, knowing that they don't know it.
So I love the fact that you've combined the idea of humility with paranoia. Again, some of your listeners might say paranoia, that's not a trait we want in our business. And if you look at websites, very few companies say in their values, we're determined to be paranoid. Okay. But having said that, we talked a little while ago about the role of leaders, and we talked about leaders need to come clean. They need to say, we don't have all the answers. We need to do new things. Similarly, leaders need to bring people together and say, let's think about or create a potential competitor that could eat our lunch. Let's think about who out there, either they exist now or they don't, could disrupt what we do. Somebody's going to try and disrupt us. My problem is a lot of companies I go into, the leaders say, these are our four big competitors, and we're constantly monitoring what they do. They're not going to be the ones that disrupt you. They're going to be slogging along just like you. Folks who are going to disrupt you are these young, hungry, entrepreneurial folks who've looked at your industry and said, you guys are dinosaurs. Now, I'm not saying you're dinosaurs today, and I'm not saying that your feet are stuck in the La Brea tar pits, but what I'm saying is you can't just do what you're doing. You've got to continue, as you said, to invest in what you're doing, but you got to do some new things. And some of those new things will eventually become big new things. But if I don't invest and I don't try and I don't do it quickly, I have no chance to make it to the future.
So, to have that chance, you emphasize the importance of small experiments, Alan. So how can those be used in a way where they can potentially lead to innovative thinking and
Perfect.
innovation?
Yeah, no, and I think it's fair. I think you did a great job early on about talking about the fact that innovation can happen in our core business. In fact, it has to. We have to get better and better. Standing still is not a formula for moving forward. I've talked to my doctor and asked if I can stand still and move forward, and he says, not physiologically possible. Okay. So we have to invest in our core business, but we have to quickly invest in some experiments that take us into new places that add value to customers. Now, let me share why that's important to think about adding value. A lot of times, companies, especially the companies that don't move very fast, decide they can figure it all out and then put something out in the marketplace and customers are going to love. And an example customers seem to love it is the Dyson cordless vacuum cleaner. If you have $2,000 to spend on a vacuum cleaner, awesome. Okay. They made 5,000 tweaks to that vacuum cleaner before they ever put it out in the world, before it ever was showtime. We don't have that luxury. So here's what I think about experimenters. Come up with an idea that you think might be valuable to your customers. Go out and engage your customers. Say, tell us what you think about this. And if you think it has potential, how would you make it better? Share it with a bunch of customers, then quickly make it better and get it out to them and see if it's valuable. We do that with enough experiments. We see the ones that resonate and we make an investment in those. I don't make a big investment of time or money in the ones that customers say aren't important. But I keep doing that as I'm investing in my core business. And as I keep doing that, I start to see the future because I start to see the new things I need to do that resonate with my customers. I don't believe it's impossible. I believe every company should have a portfolio of innovations that improve what they do now, the core of their business. Don't bet the ranch. I'm going to invest in the ranch and innovations that are going to be part of what I need to do to remain relevant in the future. I don't think it's like a hard equation. I think where folks get it wrong is they invest too much time and money in things that they don't put out into the world. I feel like a lot of companies are afraid to launch things out in the world because they think they need to get them perfect. And the reality is not at all. We need to put the 75 or 80% ideas out there and let the market make them better. The wisdom of customers or the wisdom of crowds is what's going to help us to be successful.
This is an area that I think the technology companies have done well in, Alan. A minimum viable product or minimum viable idea where it's not spending a lot of time and effort building something and hoping it's going to work a year, 2 years down the line. It's actually having a minimum viable product or minimum viable idea that you test in the marketplace and then based on that determine whether it's worth investing in or not. It's a very different mindset. So when I talk to people who are in technology in Silicon Valley, they fully grasp it, they do that. But when I talk to people who are not focused as much on technology or outside of Silicon Valley, they are very afraid because they don't want to upset any customers. Therefore, they want everything to be perfect before testing it out in the marketplace.
I think that's fair and it's logical, right? Because companies that are involved in technology know that technology is changing really fast. Companies that are in more traditional industries often say the pace of change is really slow in our industry. And so we don't need to change. That's changing. That idea is change. Okay. The pace of change in every industry is way faster than it used to be. And you mentioned AI, that's only one of the drivers. But there's so much technology that's embedded in almost every business that we could be involved in that's going to force us to change. And their market's changing. There's a new generation of customers out there. They have new expectations. They have new ways they want to buy. Who would have imagined that I would buy most of the stuff I buy now online? I make a few clicks. It's a lot easier than going to a store, okay? Folks who had figured this out a long time ago but never one were our friends at Sears Roebuck, right? 1888, they create a catalog, not much different than the Amazon website. And that catalog offered a wide range of products that they could deliver by stagecoach to any home in America. Eventually, they could deliver them by train and then truck, but they somehow missed the fact that people liked having things delivered to them. So now the folks at Amazon figured out they've compressed the time to get almost anything I ever want to get. Think about any business we're in, the time's being compressed now. I don't have time to make anything perfect. And that's cool in a way. Think about being paranoid. Think about somebody following me. I got to do things faster. Throughout the course of business history, the first folks have always won until somebody's way, way better. Think about it. Most of your listeners are way too young to understand, but the folks who pioneered car rental were Hertz, okay? They were number one, and they were number one for a long time. Then this company Avis came along like 30 years later, and their motto, we're number two, but we try harder, okay? We try to perfect the car experience. Today, Avis is not number two from trying harder. They're number five, okay? And the biggest car rental company is Enterprise. They're the biggest in the world. They had a totally different way to engage the market. They started engaging the market by renting cars to people whose cars were in the shop, okay? Not travelers who arrived at an airport. And then they said, okay, we've mastered those folks. Nobody else has. Now we have a brand. We're going to go mainstream and rent cars at airports. But so being first is great for a while, and then being better is the thing that wins. We got to be faster and better. That's the prescription for winning today.
And to do that, you also say that your book is a permission slip to stop pretending. What are many of us as leaders pretending, Alan?
Think about this. We pretend that we know the answers, and that's why we do what we do. And what happens is we tell our people, if we're not smart enough to do this, we shouldn't be involved in doing this, okay? The reality is everybody is going to figure it out on the fly. The folks who are competing against you, they don't know a lot about what you do. That's their secret weapon. They're open-minded. They can imagine a better way to do things. And so I want this book and the formula it has for how we can all think in new ways and remain relevant. I want it to really be about people saying, I don't have to have all the answers. The key thing in anything is to start, to believe there's a better way to do something, and then figure it out along the way. The book is filled with stories of folks in all walks of life, from business to dealing with societal problems, who suddenly said, I don't know the answer. There's got to be a better way. I'm going to start again and rethink it, and created compelling breakthroughs. That's what I want people to think about. I want people to think about innovation's not the domain of experts, not today. Innovation is the domain of people willing to try and put an idea out there and figure out how to make it great faster than anyone else.
So, in order to do that, Alan, if you were to throw down a challenge to the audience, one wisdom of ignorance challenge you would want every manager, CEO, executive listening to take on this week, what would it be?
If I were to simply suggest one challenge, and of course there are a bunch of things, and there's 6 things I want people to do, but it would be admit we don't have all the answers, and even if it's our core business, we can be better at it, and that we're actually going to engage the world, we've talked about it already, and see if there are ideas that will spark our own best thinking. So it's really the power of curiosity, and leaders saying, let's all be more curious this week. Let's actually get up, get out, wander around, look for ideas that could spark our new and best thinking, and bring those ideas back and have an open conversation about how we can live up to our full potential.
That's an outstanding challenge, Alan, and I have 2 thoughts with respect to it. One is that a lot of the managers, executives, and CEOs I interact with are so overwhelmed where they are not taking the time to do some of the reading and some of the thinking that it takes. And secondarily, the focus consistently in the organization is on operational meetings, on keeping things moving forward, rather than some of the innovative thinking that you were talking about. It takes some stepping back, prioritizing it. So, how would you encourage people to actually do this rather than one of those we will get around to it, and by the time we get around to it is a
Okay.
few years from now?
So, two things based on what you've just said. The first is I would challenge everyone listening to honestly look at their calendar and say to themselves, am I productive every single day of the month? Am I doing something that moves our organization forward? And then, tied to that, I would say, we're going to, as an organization, schedule a day a month to think about the future of where we're going. We can spend 29 days a month or whatever number of work days thinking about how we're better at what we do. But we're going to begin by spending a day a month and we're putting it on everybody's calendar. And so let's say today is the 28th of October. Let's just say we pick the 28th of every month. And that's going to be the day, or pick a Friday if Fridays are easier and Friday is a chill day. I take a lot of teams exploring on Friday because they're half out of the office anyway. So I might as well pull their entire bodies out of the office. We're going to actually start to make it a behavior, a practice, a muscle memory that we're going to spend part of our time, because we're not efficient all the time. We can go to 1,000 meetings, doesn't make us more brilliant. And we're actually going to start thinking about the future of our business. That's all I ask people to do. That's a simple thing to do. And if a leader can't rationalize, that's a good use of their time, and that they could, if they're organized, carve a day out and still get all the other stuff done. I think we need to have a different leader in our organization.
That's a worthy challenge that you're throwing down, because this is going to be the challenge of leadership moving into the future, where it requires the discipline to set aside the time to focus on the innovative thinking that you're talking about, which adds human intelligence to what AI and other technologies will bring to our organizations. So, in order to do that, Alan, it also helps for the audience to read your book, The Wisdom of Ignorance. Where can they find your book and follow your writing and work as well?
Of course, you can find my book on Amazon. I think 80% of business books are sold through Amazon, and it's in a hardcover and audiobook that I narrated. So if they actually, after this podcast, would like to hear 6.5 more hours of me, I think I'm no, I'm excited about this topic, but they can do that. It's also in a Kindle if they like to carry it around on their iPad or their Kindle or whatever. So it's available there. They can find out more about me by going to alangregerman.com. And my guess is that'll be in the show notes, so I don't have to spell my name out here. They can connect with me on LinkedIn. A lot of people hear me on a podcast and they follow me. I would like people to connect with me. I'd like to learn from you as much as you learn from me. So please connect. Just say you heard me on this podcast and you'd like to connect, and I will respond. So those are the way they can find out about me. And then I'm glad to share ideas I have. I'm also glad to talk with them about simple things that they can do or I can help them do to actually create some of the behaviors we've talked about on the show. I just want people to unlock the genius in all their people and unlock the potential in their businesses.
It is a beautiful way for us to approach leadership and our own lives as well, Alan. I appreciate the conversation on the wisdom of ignorance. And I love the quote you start with, Jose Andres, who's well known in philanthropic circles in the DC region for the many restaurants he has started. Says, life only starts at the edge of the unknown. Thank you for challenging us as individuals and leaders to go to that edge of the unknown ourselves and lead our teams there as well. Thank you so much for this conversation. Alan Gregerman.
Thank you for having me on. I love the conversation. I love your podcast, and I really appreciate the chance to explore ideas about how companies and organizations can be way more innovative than they ever imagined.